Welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast, where we feature conversations with entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and artists. Welcome back to the Agents of Innovation podcast. I'm your host, Francisco Gonzalez, and I've got a special guest today coming all the way from Asia, actually specifically in Thailand today. Evan Rowley, sometimes known as Captain Sid to some people. But Evan, thank you for joining the Agents of Innovation podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Francisco. I really appreciate it. Excited to talk.
Yeah, this is great. You're the first interview that I've done with somebody who's in Asia. I'm not in Asia at the moment. I'm in South Florida, but I've never been to Thailand. So I'm really excited to introduce people to somebody who, you are an American by birth, and you're also, but you've moved to Thailand about 5 years ago. So we're going to get into your story in a few minutes here. I just want to first remind people, if you're new to the Agents of Innovation podcast, we're on all the different platforms. If you're listening, no matter where you listen, Apple, Spotify, wherever else, we're there. But if you're also just listening and you want to watch this is also on YouTube. So you can actually watch and see us converse here. And then, of course, I've got all the different social media accounts and everything as well, so you can follow there. But Agents of Innovation is the podcast. The broader company that I have here is called Fearless Journeys, and Fearless Journeys is really a community that helps people build an entrepreneur mindset and connect with innovators across the world. Innovators like Evan that you're going to hear from here. But if you want to join us at Fearless Journeys, go to fearlessjourneys.org. There is a free newsletter. You can subscribe, fearlessjourneys.org. /subscribe, and you get a free newsletter. We also have a book club, so every 2 months we're engaging in a new book, and then every week I send out a little newsletter as well with the book club. But maybe one of the more exciting things that we do at Fearless Journeys is the group trips. So we've taken trips. A lot of Latin America is one of our favorite regions of the world. We've done trips Argentina, Uruguay, Guatemala, Colombia. We also did a trip in Nashville, Tennessee. And we've got some other great things coming up. So some plans to go to Peru, back to Guatemala with a band called the Curries, and also a cigar adventure trip in the Dominican Republic. So all that's at fearlessjourneys.org. And we got more planned. Maybe one day we'll make it to Thailand. We'll see. But let's get back to our guest here, Evan Rowley, a.k.a. Captain Sid. Evan, tell us a little bit about your story, where it begins. Where are you from? And tell us the chart that the course that you charted to get from there all the way to where you're at today in Thailand.
Yeah, I traveled pretty far to get where I am. So I grew up outside Chicago in the Midwest, and my dad is an airline pilot. So I was really fortunate as a kid to travel a lot. I think I got the travel bug very young. I think when I was 8 years old, it was the first time I traveled abroad, and we went to China for 2 weeks in 2001. And that was just so eye-opening. I had never had my world broken that hard before, just seeing how people live and what they eat. I remember trying to order beef broccoli, and people were like, "What is that? I've never heard of that." And I realized American Chinese food is not Chinese food. So that kind of gave me the travel bug. And I remember growing up not really being happy with where I was. I always wanted to go somewhere else. I think part of that was being able to travel to Europe and Asia and all these places and seeing how differently people lived. And then I'd come home and there wasn't anything really there for me. I wasn't a sports person. I never have been. And that was kind of what, like, most of social life when I was a little kid revolved around, and what people like in the Midwest where I was from. And so I remember I want to leave. I want to go see what's out there. And so I went to the East Coast for school, to Philly. I was in Philly for 4 years, and I got exposed to a lot more international people and people from the East Coast and West Coast and everything. And then coming out of that, I was looking for more and more freedom. I think it's kind of a constant thread that I've had for a long time. And I thought I was going to get that freedom in tech and in startups. So I went and worked in a startup, and my plan was to work for a couple of years in a startup, get a good idea and raise some money, and go do it myself and do this sort of VC-backed thing. was a big thing when I was in college to want to build the next Uber or the next Google or whatever. And then pretty quickly being in startup world, I realized that you almost have less freedom than an employee because you get a lot less guidance. You have a lot less cushy foundation to fall back on, especially as a founder. And you have the same demands. You have these investors breathing down your neck, telling you you have to hit the next goals in order to raise the next round and keep this game going. So I got kind of burnt out and disillusioned with that. And that was when I was living in New York City, and I was sitting in the back of my girlfriend's car, and something just snapped. And I said, I'm out of here. I want to leave the US. I want to go somewhere totally different. I want to get out of this very professional workaholic environment where everyone complains about their 14-hour-a-day job and all they do is work. I just wanted to get out. So that's really how I got to Thailand. And I moved here in late 2019. I gave myself 90 days to figure out if I liked it. And actually, there's a non-zero chance that I would have ended up in Latin America because my second choice was Mexico City, but I never made it there. I fell in love with Chiang Mai in northern Thailand, and the rest is kind of history. I just, COVID came, I stayed here and kind of got locked in here. The lockdowns ended pretty fast, and I just built my life here. And I had a remote job at the time, which enabled me to earn dollars and spend Thai baht. So I did well, saved a lot. And then the last 2 or 3 years, I've been unemployed and just figuring it out, trying to build different businesses and different revenue streams. So that's kind of now I'm really finding out what freedom is.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, there's a lot there in the story. What did you study in college? You were in Philly?
Yeah, I was in Philly. I studied one of those liberal arts degrees that doesn't make any money. I studied the history and sociology of science and technology. And there's only a
Well,
few schools, I think, that really offer that, but it's
and then
very
what was
esoteric.
yeah, you mentioned you went into a startup. What kind of startup? What was it technology based?
Yeah, it was a marketing tech company. So basically, what they did is it was mostly aiding retailers in helping people buy through social media. So, like, one of their biggest products was a link in bio for Instagram, where a retailer could basically tag their products in their Instagram posts, and they could say when someone's looking at a post, if you want to buy the dress in this post, go to the link in our bio. You go to the link in their bio, and it was a mirror feed of exactly what was on
Mm.
their Instagram, and could click through and get more information about the products and buy it right there and whatnot. So they would sell that to brands like Nike, big brands that wanted to get more from their social traffic, basically. So they built a bunch of different
And
tools to do that.
was this the startup that you were with when you were in New York on your final days there, or what were you doing then?
No, so I quit that job at the end of 2017, which now we get to the Bitcoin part. I got bit by the Bitcoin bug and fell down the rabbit hole. And I decided, and I found this new paradigm. I wasn't ever really that excited about what that startup did. I was just excited about being in technology and being in startups. And so it was kind of getting stale at that point. I quit that job, and all of 2018, I was pretty much taking on odd jobs, trying to figure out what I could do within Bitcoin. I worked on a fundraising for a mining farm for a little while, just doing like hourly work on financial modeling. And like they even flew me to a data center to kind of plan out like how, if we bought space in this data center, how would we lay everything out and the airflow and all that. So I went down that rabbit hole for a little while. I did some contract work, went to different like events and in crypto in general. And then it was late 2018. I basically ran out of money, to be honest, living in New York City with no
Yeah.
job and, trying to make ends meet. So ran out of money and like, I need to get a job. So I got a job at Kraken, and I worked at Kraken for a couple of years, the crypto exchange, and I did marketing
Yeah.
for them. And they're fully remote, famously fully remote. And they were very gung ho, at least at that time, about allowing people to work wherever they wanted. So that also enabled me. Then it solved a big problem. I don't need to figure out how I'm going to make money. I can just take a week off, fly, adjust, and open up my laptop and keep going.
Yeah, there you go, and you did. So were you still working for Kraken when you left for Thailand?
Yeah. Yeah. So I left for Thailand about 9 months, 10 months into that job, like late 2019. I started working for them late 2018. So I was still working for them, and basically just agreed with my boss because he kind of couldn't do anything about it because the company was so outspoken about you can work wherever you want, like as long as you show up for your meetings. So I had a lot of late nights when I first got there, but I kind of changed my schedule around a little bit so that I could work more normal hours for Thailand. But while I was working for
Yes,
them, I
because
was up,
you're
in the middle of the night.
I'm on the East
Yeah.
Coast. I'm on the East Coast of the U.S. right now, and you are 11 hours time difference ahead of me. So we're
Hmm.
recording this in the morning on the East Coast. It's nighttime on the on there. Is that something that you're typically used to doing with people with meetings and podcasts and whatever else?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, since I left my job, it's been less. I used to have, I I made a rule that I didn't want to do Friday meetings, and I just put a foot down as soon as I got to Thailand. I'm not doing Friday stuff. Now it's Friday, obviously. I do it because I love this stuff. But when I was working for that job, I had basically 4 days a week where from 8 until around 1 in the morning, I was online on Slack doing meetings. And that's when I did all of my face to face and back and forth with people. And then during the day, I would put in another 5, 6 hours of work. So every day I'd put in enough and I'd be able to make, the morning of most of the US and have the meetings that I needed to have. But I'm pretty used to it.
So Kraken is like a wallet, right? For people that want to is that for people
It's
who
an
want to exchange
exchange.
Bitcoin? It's an exchange.
Yeah, it's an
Okay.
exchange.
So it's
Yeah,
it's
so it's
sorry, go ahead.
essentially like a big casino, a big bank. You can deposit whatever coins you want in there. You can trade them back and forth. They have margin trading and futures products and whatnot. And then you can withdraw it back out.
So you now describe yourself as unemployed. Um, what do you mean by that? Are you working but doing independent projects? Are you not working at all? What's going on, Evan? You just living the life on the beach in Thailand?
No, far from that. Yeah, I mean, I kind of stuck to a rule a long time ago that I don't want to do 9 to 5 work again. It feels just soul sucking to me, and even some companies that I really admire, I think it's just not the way that I work well. It feels really nice to get a salary, and that's such an addictive feeling. But that's why I say unemployed because I don't ever want to be employed again. I like working on my own projects and putting in my ideas and my capital and getting results out of that. So since I quit my job, I built one website. Actually, while I had my job, I built one website about Bitcoin, but it didn't do very well. It just taught me that I can write content and it can rank in Google and I can get traffic. So that was a big aha moment that I can just put ideas onto a page and that can get people reaching out and commenting on it and engaging with it. So then I created a website about motorcycles and motorcycle gear, and that one started to do a lot better and actually bring in revenue. So I still work on that a little bit in the side, but that's pretty passive. And then I've also been working on this rite of passage idea, which is sort of a travel company, a hospitality company. I want to create events and experiences for people, somewhat like fearless journeys, to help people bond together through adventure and to make something that is like a vacation. It's fun, it's exciting, you get stories out of it, but it leads to real change. Because I think there's something about travel and tourism that are very different. Most people think they are traveling, they get stamps in their passport and they get a bunch of pictures, but still in their mind, they never really leave the comfort of their living room. They're just doing the things that they're comfortable with. And to me, there is so much potential in actually traveling, but it's hard to do because there's so much information at our fingertips. You can go to another country, but if your whole experience of that country is filtered by you Googling in your language for things to do and reading about other people from your country and what they've done there, and you have that phone with you all the time where you can connect with your family nonstop, you're always connected to your existing world, you're never really out there and getting uncomfortable. And that's where people really change through travel. So I want to create experiences where you can basically rock up and get that delivered to you, because you have to be very intentional about it nowadays.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, well, that caught my attention what you're doing with Rite of Passage, and that is RIDE, Rite of Passage, but I know it's probably a play on Rite of Passage, right? So, can you tell us, first of all, the word ride is in there. That might give our listeners a little hint at what you're doing, but can you tell us exactly what Rite of Passage is all about and what the experience is like, and maybe some examples of some of the travelers that have come on those trips?
Yeah, so it was really born out of my personal experience moving to Thailand. And that was the first concept I came up with, as a motorcycle trip in Thailand. That's why it's Rite of Passage, because to me, moving to Thailand is deeply intertwined with motorcycles. When you arrive in Thailand, and I never rode a motorcycle before I came here, other than getting a license in the US right before I left and moved to Thailand. When you arrive, especially in Chiang Mai, there's really one way to get around. You have to get a scooter, to get a little automatic scooter, and that's how you get around. And it totally opens up the city and the landscape, because you can go anywhere on that scooter. So I rented a scooter, started riding that. I rented bigger and bigger bikes, and now I ride every single day. I don't think twice about it. It's my normal mode of transit. And the things I was able to discover on that motorcycle was such a big part of how I changed, and all the discoveries and the personal growth that I had in my move to Thailand, as well as just all the adventures that I've had on that bike. And to be honest, the close calls, the times when I almost slid out or I almost crashed, that you don't have in the same way when you're in a car. You don't have it when you're taking taxis around, but you really have that raw experience on a motorcycle and on two-wheeled vehicles in general. And so that's how the Rite of Passage was born, is I wanted to deliver that experience that I had coming to Thailand. So I knew, okay, it's got to be on motorcycles, because motorcycles is such a key part of that journey. And it's such a great mode of transport for Thailand. And then I built the itinerary around, instead of the things that I know tourists want to see, I built them around the things that changed me a ton about coming to Thailand. So it's things that took me years to find, communities and people and connections, rather than just, go to the cool touristy place. You can find that on TripAdvisor and go on your next trip. I don't I don't feel that much value in showing you that. I take you to the Muay Thai teacher that by chance in a gym that was supposed to be closed, I met and found out that this guy is one of the best trainers that anyone I've ever met has had. And he only trains kids in his village. And then he goes to his rice farm with his buffaloes, because that's his life and he's fine with that. I'm sure if he, went to the US and he was super ambitious, he could have a big gym, because he's a very, very skilled trainer. He's been fighting since he's 8 years old and he's in his 40s now. So I want to take people to that kind of really raw, authentic experience that they're never going to find as a tourist. They would never find without someone who really spent a lot of time in Thailand doing a lot of different things. So that became a big part of the trip. And I want that whole amalgamation of all those experiences to change you as a person. And I've done one of these trips so far. I did one last December, and I think it worked, because the people in that trip, they were all super impressed with the trip from start to finish. But a few months later, it started to come out that it really changed people's lives. One guy, the whole time on the trip, he kept talking about he works for a Silicon Valley company doing design. He gets paid really well, but it's not his passion, and he wanted to work in Bitcoin. Well, he left that job and started working in Bitcoin. Now he works for Bitcoin Magazine, actually, and does design for them. Another guy sold his house and went back to Thailand for 3 months then went back to the US for about 2 weeks. And now he's back in Thailand. He's been back for like a month,
Wow.
traveling around because he has a remote IT job. He came out on the rite of passage and he's like, man, why am I not living this lifestyle every day? So he just bit the bullet and figured it out and did it because he had been thinking about it for years and he finally did it. So there was a lot of stories like that from the first group of people that this was much more than a vacation. That's
Yeah,
what I
that's
want to do.
fantastic. Well, you mentioned a phrase there that this was a raw, authentic experience, or is, I should say, a raw, authentic experience. I totally agree. I mean, that's the kind of travel I like to do, but it's interesting because if you go back in my own travel experience, maybe yours, right, and maybe a lot of people's, I mean, I love history, and I just love the idea of going somewhere where something historic happened, right? Maybe it's the Colosseum in Rome, or like whatever. Yeah, but we also have these images of, hey, I want to go to Paris and see the Eiffel Tower. Like, I want to go to New York and go to the Statue of Liberty. Like there's just like things you want to do. Maybe it's for whatever reason. Maybe it's a bucket list thing. Maybe it's just like it's an iconic image, an iconic place. These are the things you're supposed to do when you go to those places. But it's interesting because over the years I found, man, I really love more of the like getting the locals experience. And the great thing about I've got a lot of friends, a lot of places. I've built a lot of relationships over the years, and I think one of the great things about it is that in so many places in the U.S. and even other places around the world, I've got people who like I'm gonna go there. I love like even like if a friend offers me a place to stay, not only does it help my budget, but it's like I'm actually living in like a neighborhood somewhere. It's not like I'm in a
Mm-hmm.
hotel or something like that. I mean, that is the nice thing about Airbnb. At least you're like it's kind of a little more authentic, even though there's
Yeah.
a lot of
It's
varieties
gotten
within
so
those Airbnbs.
commercialized now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, but what I love though is when you get that raw, authentic experience. So it's tough though. I think for the average traveler, maybe they're not like crazy, super passionate travelers, like maybe you or I might be, like on the level of like I just always like love to go find a new place every month if I could, um, but somebody who maybe can, hey, they have 2 weeks of vacation a year, or they have very limited paid time off from their 9 to 5 job. Not everybody has the location independence like our friend James Nuveen has down in Medellin, Colombia, or whatever, right? Um, and but maybe they want to get there, maybe they don't, maybe they just got other priorities in life. Um, but how do you get somebody to a point where they can trust that Evan, they're going to fly all the way to Thailand. They may or may not know Evan. Maybe they got a friend in common. Maybe they've heard Evan on Fearless on the Agents of Innovation podcast. And maybe that's the only trust level they need right there, right? Like maybe it's like the validation of like one person telling them, but you're not, maybe one day like you'll be on the TripAdvisor, like maybe, but those kind of places that are on TripAdvisor tend to be places that are like, their hotel is getting hundreds of guests every week, whatever.
Yeah.
And you're like more boutique and more special and more raw and authentic, and so the TripAdvisor gives them that like trust of somebody they may not know. How what's the what are the challenges there, and maybe what's kind of the hooks for people being able to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and trust this Evan guy, Captain Sid, down in Thailand, and take me on a motorcycle adventure of all things around Thailand.
Yeah. Wow. So somehow you've gone right to the heart of what the most difficult part of this is. The whole planning and everything, all that's super fun. It's like, how do I get people to trust me enough to want to do this trip? So good question. The I think the way that I succeeded last year and kind of what I've been floating on, and now I need to figure out if I'm going to scale this, how do I get out of this, is that we were going to talk about this, the tour that I went on in 2022 around the country. So I bought a motorcycle in March of 2022. I went to the Bitcoin conference in Miami and I started what I called the Bitcoin tour. And I wanted to ride across the country to as many Bitcoin meetups as possible and just record essentially the stories of normal Americans and how they got into Bitcoin. because at that time there was just so much content, and still like this. There's so much content from technologists and finance people and talking heads about Bitcoin, but there's not that much content about normal people and why normal people find it valuable and interesting. So I had been following a lot of meetup accounts on Twitter, and I realized, there's a lot of these small meetups in small towns all over the US that have 5, 10 people. Wouldn't it be interesting to go link all of these up and see these places and see America from the ground and record these stories? Because these people, a lot of them aren't even going to the Bitcoin conference. They have a family and they have a job, and they just want to go to their local Bitcoin meetup. So get all these stories that no one else can get. So I think doing that trip and creating the content that I created out of it, I got Swan Bitcoin and a couple other companies to sponsor it and create like a docuseries that you watched out of that
Yeah, it's
trip.
fantastic.
Yeah, I think that doing that trip built a lot of trust and reputation. And I noticed even on the trip, as soon as I started, I got so much generosity from people, with especially places to stay, that I was shocked. Like they had never met me before. They just followed me on Twitter and seen what I was doing. And they'd open up their homes. Like, come stay with me for 1 or 2 nights in Colorado or whatever. You're welcome. Probably a third of that trip, like 30 or 40 nights, I spent just staying at strangers' houses. So I think I built a really good reputation through that. That's very grassroots. Like, these are not people that have any reason to bullshit about who I am or what happened. Like, they're just good, normal, honest people. And a lot of them had face to face experiences with me. And that built a sort of trust, I think, with a lot of people that were watching the tour from afar. And that's how I got all those signups last year, how I got 6 people to come out and ride with me in Thailand. And then this year was similar. Some of those people from last year that couldn't make it, now they've signed up for this year's. I just went to Bitcoin Prague and met a few people there. One guy that I met in person had 3 hours of conversation with. He signed up to come ride. So it really takes, for this kind of product, this kind of experience, really high trust level. Another thing is I don't tell anyone the itinerary, and I'm very staunch about that, because I don't want you to have preconceptions about what you're going to experience and what you're going to do. I want you to go into it like a child, like curious about what you're seeing in front of you right now, rather than, oh, I did research about this thing that we're going to see and I have this feeling about it. No, I want it all to feel very new, and for you to be open to that experience in the moment. And that takes a really high trust level. I understand that. So that's the hardest thing. It's like, how do I find people who are going to trust me with that?
Yeah, I know. Well, I think you've done the right thing, and I think what's interesting is there's also, I don't know if everybody who's come on your first trip, has some connection to the Bitcoin community, but it seems like, there's definitely a strong presence there. Um, and so I think that maybe there's something that other people maybe kind of already have in common with you. Maybe it's the fact that, the Bitcoin interest, the Bitcoin conferences, Bitcoin meetups. It's super interesting watching your series that you referenced, the docu-series, and you rode a motorcycle across the U.S. You started in Miami, and
Great city.
that's great.
Great city.
And so the documentary was in 2022, and it's interesting because I don't remember. Miami started hosting these Bitcoin conferences, and I think they got really big in Miami kind of post-COVID, when Florida was more open than most of the U.S. and even most of the world. But it's it's like thousands of people. So I went to the 2023 Bitcoin conference in Miami. We just learned that we were both there at the same time as well. So that's kind of funny. Maybe we crossed paths because you and I have not met in person yet. But those conferences, the one thing that really blew me away about it, obviously there's speakers and there's all these Bitcoin enthusiasts, but there's just this huge economy around Bitcoin, around all the blockchain technologies and everything. And you see that in the exhibition. And I was just blown away. I'm like, look, obviously, I think the big thing with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are, they are currencies, right? People trade them for value. And we can go deep into the to the philosophical things on all sorts of levels of maybe comparing that to fiat currency, meaning the US dollar or other currencies. And people can debate whether Bitcoin has a future, or if how's it ever going to compare to the dollar. And I don't, I don't really want to debate that right now, but I just think what's interesting about the whole environment there is just the technology and the economy that surrounds at least the idea of Bitcoin, or the promise of it. And I mean, just what people are doing with like energy sources and like there's just so much stuff. So you're walking in there, and I thought it was super interesting in your documentary, and also I think you're on another podcast recently talking about how you show up with this motorbike, and that was the beginning of your journey. And yeah, tell us just about what it was like to you. So you had already been in Thailand for like at least 3 years at this point. You got to learn how to ride bikes in Thailand. So you're like, oh, I'm just gonna like ride a bike across the U.S. I mean, tell me how that started.
Yeah, I mean the story of that tour is pretty wild. So learned how to ride like starting in 2019, but I'd never ridden anything bigger than like a 200 kilo bike, maybe like not even 200, like 150, 175 kilo, like 500 cc bike was the biggest I'd ever ridden. And the bike that I took across the US was a Harley that's almost 2 liters, like 2000
Wow.
cc and 450 kilos, like 900 pounds with a full gas tank. So much bigger bike. I'd never ridden a motorcycle in America. I'd obviously driven in America. I grew up there, but riding and driving very, very different. So there was a lot of unknowns going into it, and everything kind of had to work out well. So I started planning that trip pretty much when I quit my job, which was late 2021. And I had this seed of an idea, like, what if I did a road trip across the US? What if I went to all these Bitcoin meetups? What if I rode a motorcycle? What if I raised money to do it? And so I kind of whittled everything down, and I realized I can do this trip. I can maybe raise a little bit of money from a couple companies that I respect to cover the costs. So I was able to get enough money to cover the costs, but then I had to get back and actually execute it and make this dream happen. So I got a plane ticket. I got back. I actually got COVID on the way home. And that was back when you had to take a PCR, not a PCR, but the rapid box test or whatever on the
Mm-hmm.
phone with someone just to get into my own country. So
Wow.
I'm in Germany. I had a layover in Germany and I get super sick. And so I was with my dad actually, because he was flying me back to the US and he's like, take the test right now. So I took the test and it was negative of all things. So I got on the plane, I got back in, and then I took another test and it's bright red. And yeah, you have COVID. So then I'm sick. I had never had COVID before. I was sick for like 2 weeks. As soon as I get out of that and I'm starting to feel good again, I got to get to Florida and go bike shopping. So I fly down there. I met up with my cousin who lives down there. I went to like 5 dealerships in a day in a rental car and just picked a bike and bought it stupidly. I should have leased it. I bought it in cash. I bought a used motorcycle in cash and put down a credit card and most of my bank balance for that bike and drove off on this massive machine. Like no idea how to ride it. Almost got hit the first day because someone was pulling out of a lot and didn't see me. So I almost wiped out before the trip even started. And then I got to Miami and it was like, all right, now there's no way back. Like I have to figure this out and how this is going to go. So I just started getting on Twitter and messaging people. I'm famous for walking around in that conference center in 2022 at the Bitcoin conference with one of the saddlebags of the bike because I wanted people to sign the saddlebags to get all these signatures. I thought, what a great opportunity to get signatures. I'll get them at the meetups, but I can get a lot at the conference. And originally I brought one guy, Crypto Graffiti, he's a pretty famous Bitcoin artist. I got him to come to the roof, to the parking lot to sign my bag. And he's looking at me like, why did you make me walk all the way up here? Can you just take that off and take it down? So like, yeah, okay. So people would see me and yell. And that's how I got the nickname Sid, because my Twitter account's Captain Sid, and they would yell, Sid, Sid, like, you're the guy doing the motorcycle trip. So just one thing led to another. I made connections and started to get dates together for different parts of the trip, and just figured it out as I went, pretty much, and tried to
So my
make it
understanding is
as
you had this,
impactful thing as I
you
could.
you you created this Twitter account a while back with Captain Sid, and then people just started calling you that in person, so everybody kind of thinks this is your name, right? And I
Yeah,
guess you still go
people
by
really
Captain
did.
Sid.
Yeah. Yeah, I was sort of like, so also part of my reasoning for that is when I worked at Kraken, they really drilled it into us, the importance of security and privacy. They're a super security conscious company. So they said, like, while you're working here, never tell anyone that you work at this company. You can't put it on your LinkedIn, because you make yourself a target, basically. And if they get you, they can get into the company, get into the funds and everything. So
Mm.
that made me very wary of using my real name in any way. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to be traveling around the country and shaking 1,000 hands. Probably good if I have a little bit of distance from my real name. And so that's why when people started calling me Sid, I'm like, this is it. Now I don't have to introduce myself and use my real name. Funny enough, now I've kind of gone backwards, because now that the trip is over, when I meet someone at a meetup or whatever, I'm like, hey, I'm Evan. And then other people are calling me Sid, and they see online that I'm calling myself Sid, and they're like, who the hell is Sid? So now I'm like, okay, I'm going to move back. Like, my handles are all still Sid, but some people they're like, you're Sid. I'm never calling you Evan, but I've started sort of rolling it back.
So it's interesting. So tell us a little more about. I mean, obviously we talked about how in Thailand, pretty much everybody's on some kind of bike, mostly like a scooter or something. I'm assuming, because I see a lot of this in Latin America as well, but I think it's way more prevalent in Thailand, from my understanding, and a lot of Asian countries. I mean, obviously got huge populations. You have a lot of people coming. Maybe the upward mobility has started for them. They're able to afford a bicycle, but a car is much more of a luxury item. But you may be sitting in traffic a lot more with a car than being able to zip around on a scooter, which is a little more flexible and gets a lot more people down the road, I guess. But I don't ride. I've been on a scooter a few times. Like, when I say a scooter, I mean those little street scooters. One time I had a scooter on a Greek island, and I have a story that didn't work out so well for me that day. That if my friends, the rest of the boat trip, we were doing a little island hopping sailboat trip. They called me Scooter the rest of the trip because of what happened on the scooter. So so we should not revisit that right now. But that's probably it for my biking experience. But I know I do have some friends, including some friends down in Guatemala, who love to bike and go out and especially on roads that maybe go around some mountains and things like that. But tell me about the experience of being on a bike, and how does it contribute to what you're trying to do with rite of passage, and maybe even just biking in general. I mean, you talked about it's not the same as a car.
Yeah. Motorcycling to me it's a form of meditation. I think that's the best way I can put it, like why I love it so much. There's something about the amount of freedom that you get on a bike. There's nothing surrounding you, right? You're basically riding on a seat that's just flying through the air at an impossible speed that naturally you would never go at. But you have this really high responsibility with that, because there's very grave consequences if you screw up. So it forces your mind to really sharpen and to focus a ton. And that, I think I have a problem with overcomplicated, overthinking. I'm the kind of person that gets stuck in analysis, that I run hot. My brain is always thinking and calculating and whatnot. And when I get on a bike, that just has to stop. If I sit and meditate, I can get there. But if I get on a bike, I have to get there. There's something biologically in me that's saying you need to focus right now, because your life is on the line. And that kind of focus, there's no other activity I've ever found that Other than driving to some extent, I get that with driving, but motorcycling is like 10 times more. And that's what really attracted me to bikes, I think, and what has hooked me for so long, and why I wanted to make it such a big part of the rite of passage and make that a motorcycle trip. There's just something about that motorcycle experience. And then when you do that with a group, you're combining that feeling with a bunch of people who also love that feeling. And it's a certain kind of bond. You know, people who ride they're a certain type of person. And you have this kind of understanding and this implicit bond when you ride together that you don't, if you know, just hike or you ride in a taxi together, you don't have that same bond. So that's kind of why I picked it and why I've stuck with it for so long.
Yeah, that's interesting. Also, like you said, like so let me ask you: the people who come on the rite of passage, um, are they already bikers? Are some of them people biking for the first time? Like, what's the range of experiences people have on a bike?
I ask for at least 2 years of at least on road or off road really experience in riding, because especially with Thailand and with the risks involved, if you want to come here and rent a bike and go on your own, like that's on you to take on that risk. But if you're coming with a group of people, I would feel irresponsible taking somebody that really didn't know what they were doing and putting them with a group where their mistake can cause injury to someone else. So I ask for a minimum amount of skill, and to me, I think 2 years is a good cutoff for that. I'm exploring doing other types of trips, like scooter trips as well as non-motorcycle trips, because I think there is other ways to achieve kind of the feelings and the change that I want to achieve. But motorcycles are just a really fast way to it. It's just that motorcycles are they're very niche. To find someone who wants to come out and do this kind of trip, come all the way to Thailand and do it on a motorcycle is a very small group of people, and I don't have very good reach. So yeah, but
Yeah,
there's something
and
special about that two wheels.
Thailand's not exactly around the corner for people from, say, the U.S., particularly maybe from Europe. You're
Yeah.
not super close, so you got to plan it. Although I do, I was actually when I was just in Europe recently and talking to some friends, and it seems like a lot of people have a real interest in Thailand. I have had a few friends that have spent some time in Thailand from the U.S. And so, in fact, I think 2 months ago or something, I had two friends. They don't even know each other, and I noticed that they were both in Thailand. Just looking at where
Hmm.
they were. One of them had told me they were, and the other one, I think I saw something on an Instagram story, and I said, "Man." So they just missed each other. But then I also, I don't remember if I connected them with you or something, but I was telling them about you, and I think one comes back there a lot, so we'll have to connect him with you
Hmm.
when he gets back. But you know, I- you mentioned before motorcycle, being on a biking is kind of like meditation, and you talked about it focuses your mind, and you're you mentioned maybe it focuses you to concentrate, and just that level of focus, because we're so distracted these days. We got all these technology and phones and all sorts of distractions, but you know um the Fearless Journeys community right now, as we're recording this in the months of July and August, we are reading through the book Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday. And I don't know if you had a chance to read that book yet, but it's really great. But he talks about um he's very much Ryan Holiday. A lot of his books are focused on the Stoic philosophy, and there's definitely some chapters in there about emptying your mind and being the whole idea is being still, and achieving finding stillness, and especially in such a noisy world with so much distraction. The world's noisier and maybe more distractions today than ever before, but the human condition has always been distracting, and we've always had um, problems achieving stillness. And so and Ryan Holiday kind of describes stillness as the ability to be steady, while the world spins around you, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I think that sounds like what you got to do on a bike, right? There's so many things spinning around you. There's other bikes. There's traffic lights. There's stop signs. There could be weather elements, right? I mean, like you said, you're just flying through the air on a seat. You're going fast. I mean, you got to be in control. So it does sound like being on a bike is finding that steady hand, and while there's a lot of things spinning around you, it just seems interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just like the way that I operate and the way that some people operate, but for me, I think I need that intensity to calm myself down. Because if I sit alone in a room, I feel like I'm boiling over. And at some point that does end, but I've done like silent meditation retreats a few times here. And I've heard that this is common with a lot of people. It takes about 3 days and then you finally become still and calm down. But those 3 days are pure hell because like I don't talk, I never bring anything to write, but I'm like, I have 20 ideas I need to write down right now. And I just have to let them go. It's really difficult to do, but on a bike, it's easy. I can't think about them. And you're exactly right. You're managing all these things when you're on a bike, all these risks. I remember when I got my motorcycle license in the US, the instructor talked about how a crash, people think that a crash is one thing. Somebody came out in front of them or they were riding too fast, but she said it's usually 2 to 3 small things that combine on top of each other. So like you may see, oh, someone T-boned into a car and it's the car's fault for pulling out. Well, the car pulled out, but they were also going too fast and they had glare coming into their visor, so they weren't able to see it. So it's always this combination, like you might slide out. Well, it wasn't just that you were going fast, it's also that it was wet on the road and that you were thinking about something else and you're distracted. So I sometimes consciously think about that while I'm riding, like how many risk factors do I have? It starts raining. Okay, now I need to lower my speed because I'm not going to have the same braking distance, or I'm really stressed out. All right, I need to not go so fast because I have the speed and the stress and the glare or the heat or whatever it is that's stressing me out that's going to contribute possibly to a crash. So you have to kind of manage those things and keep it all in control. And that takes you away from all the other ruminations your brain is making.
Well, I think people can achieve this kind of thing in a lot of different ways. You're using motorbiking, but I was recently just hitting tennis with a friend a couple of weeks ago, and I've been a lifelong tennis player, played junior tennis and all that. And I was telling him how, a lot of times I will, like a few years back, I was playing, maybe 10 years back, I was playing a lot more tennis. And I remember being on the tennis courts, and I'd be busy with my job all day and all these stuff. And I go out and I actually play a competitive match with somebody for an hour or two. And I remember like driving home or something and just asking myself the question, where the hell was I the last 2 hours, like mentally? Like the whole world, like everything in my life, I totally forgot about, because when you're playing something like tennis, you're not only concentrating on your own form and where you're going to hit the ball and running and all, and taking drinks of water on your breaks and all these things. You also have a competitor who's trying to move you around the court and do things too. You're focused on them as well. So this could be in a lot of different kind of sports, that you literally, your mind literally has to go somewhere else if you're actually going to be successful. But I think what you're saying with the biking is, boy, your mind has to really be focused, which means if it's focused on the biking and all the things you're thinking about on the bike, it's freeing you from all the other stresses of life or all the other busyness of life or distractions. So it really is a nice focus. Speaking of which, I think on some of on some of the things you're doing with Rite of Passage, are you combining it with something like a mastermind, or what do you do with the groups in addition to taking them to cool places they might eat or do Muay Thai, or like, what are some of the other things you might do to help these people go on a Rite of Passage?
Yeah, so the first trip that I did was kind of like a leisure culture trip. I wanted to just focus on riding and eating and exploring Thailand and having all these different cultural experiences. And then I heard about this concept of a mastermind and started doing them with with friends in different groups and did them at conferences and things. And it's such a powerful format. This idea, it's so simple that you sit down with a group of people, the group of peers that are working on business or whatever topic that you're interested in improving, other people that are improving on that as well. And you basically just share a big problem that you're facing and get feedback from other people. And like I've been doing this with a group of guys in Chiang Mai, just friends of mine, and the amount of ease with which they can point out the blind spots that you have, and the things that you never really considered that might be helpful in solving your problem, the resources they might have that you never even knew were there, the connections they have, whatnot, the experiences they've had that can add to yours. It feels to me like just a complete cheat code for achieving anything. And so I had this idea, why not combine the mastermind with the motorcycle trip? Because the motorcycle trip, to me, doing this kind of adventure where you're going to novel places every day, you're riding the bike, you're getting that meditative experience alone on the bike, you are stimulating the creativity in your brain in a way that just doing what a normal mastermind does, where you're in a retreat villa or something, or you're in even worse, a conference room at a hotel, that's such a stale environment for juicing your creativity. So if we combine it with this adventure around Thailand, where you're seeing these novel things, you're going to these hidden restaurants and cafes and whatnot, that's going to stimulate the creative juices and help everyone help each other even more. So I'm piloting that for the first time this year and trying to do it as just like a shorter format. It's only 5 days versus the other one is like 9 or 10 days. It's a little less luxury. It's still really nice, but it's more for like young entrepreneurs and digital nomads that are building something, and they want to meet other entrepreneurs. They want to learn from each other, but they also want to have a good time and explore an adventure. They don't want to just be locked in a hotel room doing this kind of event, doing something quote unquote professional. So I kind of want to blur those lines a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you know, on your trips, we talked a little bit more about the way you've built community, and all of those things. Um, but really, what you're doing as well is you're getting people out of their comfort zone. And what you just mentioned there, uh, one thing I've noticed with travel as well, right? I mean, when you get people out of their just day-to-day life, I mean, it could literally be, you're in Florida and you're traveling across the state somewhere, or you're traveling to another state, or you're traveling across to another country. I think the mere act of leaving your day-to-day environment, and just going somewhere, like breaking away for a week. I mean, I think that act of travel, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month, it's like you're putting yourself in a different environment, and it allows you to think outside the box. I mean, I've had so many times where I've just gone on a trip, and the trip had nothing to do with anything, and I come back and it's like you have some different thoughts because you are out of your normal environment day to day. And so when you do that with a group, sometimes some of the members of the group know each other, sometimes they know nobody else in the group, but they have these bonds that they form with people because they're experiencing something new together. Also, I kind of feel like, when you are in a routines are very great, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, right? I think it's very important. We have to understand how we build habits, how we can possibly break habits or start new ones. But at the same time, breaking away from the day to day, when you're in a routine, time seems to go very fast. Like it's like the same thing every day. And I feel like when I travel sometimes, like, because everything is so new, like I'm in a new place, I'm experiencing something new, I'm meeting new people. It's almost like if I've been gone for 2 weeks, it's almost like I've been gone for 2 months. Like, I don't know,
Time
it's like
literally
the
slows
weirdest.
down. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
idea of time slowing down. So I kind of feel like you take this idea of travel with a group, somewhere else, time's slowing down, you're experiencing something new with all these people that may be new to you as well. And then you get this opportunity to kind of bring ideas together, fresh ideas with other people, share challenges, um, share successes as well. You know, people can say, "Hey, I did this," and when I was experiencing a similar problem, maybe they have connections that you don't have as well that they can help you with. So it's super interesting. So how does, like, I guess one of the questions here is just, how does like the travel element help in the mastermind kind of idea as well, like when you combine those two things?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. It's the novelty, delivering that novelty every day, that you're going to different places. Every part of the mastermind, you're going to be in a different cafe or different restaurant or hotel all around northern Thailand in very non-touristy places. Shouldn't say non-touristy, but not really for foreigners. Like a lot of the places that we go, they're a little bit touristy for Thai people, but I'm assuming most people that would come on this trip, they're going to be like Westerners or digital nomads or foreigners that are coming through Thailand for a period of time, and they want to do some kind of adventure like this and don't live in Thailand. And so they're going to be in environments that they would otherwise never really even know about or be exposed to, because you kind of have to be here for a while to find the things that I've put on this itinerary. And I think the motorcycle element as well, I kind of got this from the concept of a walk and talk. If you're familiar with that, I think I sent this to you in our first exchange, actually. Yeah, the idea of a walk and talk is like you hike and walk all day with a group of people, and because you're walking, you have all these new ideas and you facilitate conversation. And usually the facilitator on a walk and talk will have some sort of like topic that they want you to talk about on the walk, and then you'll talk about it at dinner that night or whatever. You basically walk every day with different topics with this group, and it's kind of like usually an unplugged sort of experience where you kind of go into the woods with a bunch of people and have, varying styles and luxury levels and whatnot, but you have this sort of off the beaten path experience. I want to do that on motorcycles, but instead of talking on the bike, it's the opposite. You have time to really ponder, because a lot of the riding that we'll be doing will be more like quiet mountain riding, where you don't have as many things coming at you as you do like in a city. So you can sort of meditate on an idea and you can think about something while you're riding, but you have to think about it quietly because you're not talking to other people. You're not in a van with a bunch of people. You can't look at your phone and do other stuff. It's just you and the road. So you can kind of meditate on a theme. So I've structured the mastermind so each day has its own theme. Like one day we're going to talk about scaling, and I'll have a prompt in the morning. And when we ride, you're thinking about that. You're meditating on that idea, so that when you come to the mastermind in the afternoon, you have all these thought connections already created through that act of riding.
That's great. Well, Evan, this has been really great to hear your story and everything you're doing. How can people find you, follow you? Any websites they should visit to learn a little bit more about what you're doing?
The best place to follow me, where I'm most active, is on Twitter. So my Twitter handle it's in if it shows in Riverside, at Captain Sid, SIDD, Captain Sid. So you can find me there and follow me there. The Rite of Passage, if you go to RIDE of passage.live, that's the website with the motorcycle trips and I'm going to be adding other retreats and non-motorcycle trips as well. The mastermind is riteofpassage.live/mastermind if you're interested in doing one of those trips. I'm doing 3 dates this year, the last week of November and the first 2 weeks of December, which lines up with a big SEO and like online digital marketing conference that's in the middle of November. So it's going to be right after that. I'll do 3 back-to-back Monday to Friday mastermind rides here in Northern Thailand.
Those are taking place in Thailand, the SEO conference or whatever you just mentioned.
Yeah. So in case people are not familiar, like for whatever reason, Chiang Mai, Thailand is like the SEO capital of the world. They're most of the biggest people that do this, that build mostly affiliate websites, but also a lot of agencies and do sort of search engine marketing and search engine like organic ranking. A lot of them are based in Chiang Mai or spend significant amounts of time in Chiang Mai.
That's
There's a big
interesting. And you know
community
what?
here.
Before we let you go here, Evan, for those who are not so familiar with Thailand, I mean, I'm not that familiar other than kind of knowing kind of where it is, right? If I had to describe it and just knowing a little bit from a few people who have been there. First of all, tell us where exactly is Thailand in the map of Asia? What's around Thailand? And then what are these cities like? Because, yeah, you hear Thailand and you might think, some kind of tropical beach, but are there large cities? I'm giving you a softball question here, but tell us a little bit about what people would experience in Thailand, and again, where it kind of is situated.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is like Thailand, I've noticed, especially over the last year, because I've been talking to a lot more foreigners and, I went to BTC Prague and whatnot, and I've been marketing these rides. I've realized that perception is not reality. There's a very different perception of what Thailand is like outside than here from Westerners. So like the first thing I'll say is this is the safest place I've ever been in my entire life by a very, very long shot. It's insane the things that you can get away with here, leaving your keys in your motorbike, like your $500 helmet sitting out, never gets stolen, laptop in a cafe for a half hour while you're off doing whatever, never taken. So there's just a level. I mean, women will go home from the bars at 3 a.m. No one worries about it. Like that, just nothing
Mm.
happens. So that's a really nice, crazy thing that you never think about. I talk to a lot of Americans who think that Thailand is dangerous. It just blows my mind. So as far as like the geography and what there is to do and the cities and everything in Thailand, Thailand is Southeast Asia, like basically in the middle of Southeast Asia. It's between Myanmar and Cambodia and Laos. And then Vietnam is on the other side of Cambodia and Laos. And Thailand kind of has, to me, I think of like, there's 3, maybe 4 regions of Thailand. There's northern Thailand where I am, which is pretty much like the foothills of the Himalayas. It really does extend all the way to the Himalayan mountains. And we're on like the tail end of it. So it's just rolling hills. They're not very tall. I guess they're mountains. They're not very tall mountains, but they're rolling and uninterrupted basically from Chiang Mai north, especially northwest. It's just crazy hills everywhere, which is amazing for motorcycling, obviously. So you have northern Thailand, central and eastern Thailand are very flat. And that's a lot of like rice growing area. Bangkok is right in central Thailand, right on the Gulf of Thailand. And Bangkok is like a big metropolitan city, to your softball question. Has, I think, 10 million plus people in all of Bangkok. It has everything that you would expect from a big major city. Great infrastructure, huge malls, great hospitals. Like it has everything you would want from a major city, except for the crazy, insane costs. It's for a Westerner, it's very good value. And then southern Thailand is sort of like a very long, thin sliver. And that's what most people think of when they think of Thailand, is all the beaches and the islands and the coconuts and everything. And that's where I go to vacation because it's easy to get down there. And southern Thailand has exactly that. It's beaches and a lot of parties, but there's a lot of really nice resorts as well, and kind of high-end stuff that's being built all over there. And from what I know of people who've come here 20, 30 years ago, it's completely changed. It's developed so much and so quickly that really Thailand has developed from, I think maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was all backpackers, especially post-COVID. I don't see very many backpackers anymore. It's much more high end now. It's families and wealthier tourists coming to stay at nice resorts. So the infrastructure is growing really fast.
And remind me where you're living.
I'm in Chiang Mai in northern Thailand, right at
Chiang Mai. And
in the
how large is
foothills.
Chiang Mai?
It's about 1 million people. So to
Okay.
me, it feels like a big village. It's also a very low city. There's really very few high rises, very few buildings over like 5, 6 stories. And I'm told it's because there is a city ordinance around the height of buildings versus the height of temples. And there are so many ancient temples in Chiang Mai dispersed everywhere that are like 1,000 years old that most of the buildings can't be built above a certain height. So there's only a few areas where you see these high-rise apartments going up. Most of it is pretty low and pretty old, rustic.
And what's the predominant religion there in Thailand?
It's something like 80 or 85% Buddhist, like Thai Buddhist, which is its own kind of amalgamation of Buddhism along with Hindu beliefs and Thai animist sort of traditional folk beliefs that have been here for much longer than Buddhism. And then the rest is some Christian, some Muslim, everything else pretty much fills that last 15% or so.
Yeah, interesting. Well, you've been there now 5 years, so it sounds like you like it there, and you may be there a while. So we'll be following your journey, Evan, aka Captain Sid, and so we'll look forward to that. And I've never been to Thailand. The only time I've been to Asia, I was in China in 2013 with my brother, and I had a friend that was living in Shanghai at the time, and we stayed with him for like the first 4 days. I think slept on his couches, and then we went from there to Guilin, which was really cool. It's actually maybe a place you want to visit in the future if you haven't, but it probably sounds like something that you might have seen something like it. I don't know in Thailand, but kind of more in the interior of China. A lot of funky shaped mountains and riverways. I mean, it's really cool. They actually, I think, well, I don't know if this was the thing, but my friend told me when he first suggested we go there, he said just Google, Google image, the planet Pandora from Avatar, and that's what Guilin is. So it was interesting, and
that's cool.
He was right. And then we went to Beijing, but huge cities, and that was my first big thing visiting Asia, was just how large the cities were, particularly in China. But anyway, that's my only visit to Asia ever. So I have had a number of friends that have spent some time in Thailand. Now we've connected with you, so we may have to put Thailand on the future itineraries for Fearless Journeys. If and when we do that, we will definitely partner with Evan here and Captain Sid. So I do want to hear from people. If you're listening to this, you're watching this, and Thailand is something that would be of interest to you to do, if you want to go with Fearless Journeys and see us build a group trip around it, let me know. But also, if you just want to connect with Evan here, Captain Sid, we are happy to send you his way, and maybe it's a rite of passage, maybe it's something else with him. But definitely, that's one thing I really just try to do here is connect people with innovators across the world, people like Evan Rowley, and we're just really happy to have you on. So I just want to say thank you for being on the Agents of Innovation podcast, and thanks for being an agent of innovation as well.
Thanks, Francisco. It's been super fun. And yeah, if anyone is listening to this and is coming to Thailand or wants to come to Thailand, absolutely reach out to me or reach out to Francisco and get connected. I love these kind of connections. This stuff just so cool to find someone
we think
that
very
watched
much
our
alike
podcast and came out here. It's just awesome.
We think very much alike in that sense, and I'll put all your information in our show notes as well. So in case anybody missed what we talked about here, you can check the show notes for some of the links and be able to follow Evan here. So thank you again, Evan, for being on the Agents of Innovation podcast, and we'll keep following your journey.
Thanks. Peace.